All right, so today's speaker is Valerie Roth, and she's a member here, and truthfully, Tabitha hit her up for this program because she was interested in the Dillon Brothers and their sheet music, which she collects. She was recently elected the Virtual Historical Society president, so good luck. So she's going to be our presenter today. She is going to be accompanied by her mother,
yes,
Peg Roth, on the keyboard, and a friend, Joe Finetti, who will be singing later on in the program. Promise you, much better than mine.
Thank you.
Or Valerie, sorry.
Thank you for coming to the Lunch and Learn. I got interested in Will Dillon and the Dillon Brothers because I do collect piano sheet music. I have a collection up here that you can look at later. I like the pre-1920s stuff, and mostly for the cover art, but I also like plunking out the tunes on the piano. I became aware that there was a composer who lived in Cortland named Will Dillon, and I started collecting his pieces, and then I got more and more interested in Will Dillon himself. So we're going to talk about the Dillon Brothers. This was Cortland's most famous, by far, showbiz family. There were 6 brothers in this family who performed on the vaudeville stage, wrote a lot of music, and were involved in the music industry in various ways. And we'll just hope that all my slides work. This is the Dillon family. There were 10 children. It's the classic American story of immigrant success. The parents, Michael Dillon and Mary Ellen Fitzgerald, were born in Glyn, Ireland. They married at the age of 16 and 17, promptly came over on a boat to the United States and started having children. In 1870, we can find Michael listing his profession as a saloon keeper in Truxton. And in 1880, I think the family had a little downturn in fortune because he listed his profession as a peddler, and they were living somewhere in Cortlandville. In 1892, he was a merchant in Cortlandville, so things were looking up. And then by 1900, the family had prospered well enough, and all the 10 children had been born. They bought a house in Cortland on 45 Pendleton Street. Those of you who live in Cortland will recognize this view. This is Pendleton Street, which takes a sharp turn to the left, and the train station is at the end of the street. There is no longer a house at 45 Pendleton Street, but it sat on this little narrow strip of grass, right between Pendleton Street and the railroad tracks. Very narrow area. In that day, you know, in the late 1800s, when the family was here, there were about 60 trains a day that came through Cortland. So imagine how loud this household must have been with all the thoroughfare going on Pendleton Street and then all the trains in the backyard. And perhaps this environment was why so many of the kids enjoyed all the social milieu and all the activity and went into show business. I'm not sure. The other interesting thing about this location is this building across the street still has lettering on it that says F.H. Cobb.
The lettering's gone.
Oh, the lettering's gone. Well, I thought it was there when I went by, but maybe not. It was the original wholesale distributor for the IGA chain of food stores. And Michael Dillon, by the time they lived in Cortland, was listing his occupation as a grocer. So he probably worked across the street or for one of their subsidiary grocery stores. And the Dillon family remained at this location for the rest of the parents' lives. In the 1870s, high school was sort of optional, and the 2 eldest Dillon brothers were not much for school. And they left Cortland at around the age of 16 and got on stage with a troupe of entertainers that made a circuit right around 1880. This is the era where we consider vaudeville kind of starting. So they were the initial people that got involved with what we now know as vaudeville. Being a member of a variety show that would travel around, they stayed mostly in the Northeast, but they went quite far in the Northeast, and they had a comedy routine. You can kind of guess that from the way they're dressed. They had a comic banter. They would sing comic songs and make funny gestures and dance around. So I want to pause for a minute and not talk about the Dillons for just a few minutes. I'm going to put on a little vaudeville show for you, because let's consider what was vaudeville. When I was a little girl and I heard the term, I thought it was a place you would go to see a show like Smithville or Gilbertsville, but it wasn't. Vaudeville was just the term for different bands of entertainers that would travel around and go to a different city every couple days and put on variety shows. And the early vaudeville shows were great entertainment and very diverse. And I wrote down there are 14 different acts that these Dillon brothers performed alongside. during one of their tours. And I just want to read the acts to you so you get an idea of what these vaudeville shows were like. It started off with a one-act farcette play called Dickie, and then a dramatic act called Trenton, and then a comic who sang, and then wonderful tricks on the wheel, which I imagine was a bicycle and did tricks. Then the three Muscagnos, acrobats, then a child singer with her father, then a comic trio who played 15 instruments, then a magician, then a contortionist, then axe juggling, and then parodies by the Dillon Brothers. So they were sort of the feature act. They would get up and do their song parodies and everyone would laugh. And then the last two acts are sort of mysterious to me. They were listed as sand paintings. Now, I don't know how you show sand paintings on a stage, but that was one of the listed acts. And the last thing was a calotechnoscope, travel views. That was some early form of motion picture they'd show that would move on the screen. So that was the late 1800s, what the Dillon Brothers would have performed alongside. So let's have a little vaudeville show here. I'm going to show 4 brief video clips from the internet of vaudeville acts. Now, the fact that I'm showing video tells you that these are not the Dillon Brothers. This was later. There wasn't any video in 1880 or 1890 or 1900 when they were active. But these acts will represent the kinds of things that they would have been in a show along with. This is Baby Rose Marie. Now, some of you gray-haired people may remember the old Dick Van Dyke show. Rose Marie was one of his office mates. She always wore the little bow in her hair. She had this raspy voice. And she was a child prodigy, and she was very active on the vaudeville stage in the late 20s. So this is a little after the Dillon Brothers, but Baby Rose Marie will represent for us the child performers that were very often featured in these vaudeville shows. I think this is 2.5 minutes. And whoops. Well, let's hope that I can get it to work. Yep, it's going to work. I've listened to this about 40 times, and every time I listen to it, I'm more impressed. The lyrics are on your handout. She's very hard to understand, but I'm telling you, Shirley Temple had nothing on this little girl. She is 5 years old here. Smithville. I mean, your only entertainment in those days was church, or as my mother reminded me, going to lawsuits. That was a big form of entertainment. There were no movies, there were no TV, no radio, no phonographs, no colored photographs. There was very little in the way of entertainment. So when a vaudeville show came to town with acts like this that you've never seen, people dressed in funny ways, animal acts, you know, what a thrill it must have been. So our next performer, this is actually a very early video, 1904. This lady very well did perform with the Dillon Brothers. Her name was Princess Raja. She was billed as a gypsy, and she danced. And this is a very early video. There's no sound, but she will represent the dancing ladies. Sort of risque for the time. I'm not sure this was a vaudeville show for children.
I'm not sure that last song was for children.
I know. Shockingly suggestive for a 5-year-old.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, that is early, isn't it? 1904.
Boo-boo-ba-doo.
Yeah.
As my mother used to say, must be jelly because jam don't shake like that.
Best part.
Oh, how did you do that?
Very careful.
Oh, your teeth. Poor teeth.
It's said that the early vaudeville audiences were shocked when women would perform. It was almost like they didn't realize women would have skills like this. So women performers were really
Good
sought
teeth. You wouldn't want to sit in the front row for those.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress.
Next
Visit us
in our
at
vaudeville show,
lc.gov.
this is my favorite. Okay, this is Haji Ali. He was a regurgitator. Now this was an actual thing on the vaudeville circuit. People would get up, put things in their stomach, and regurgitate them. This was a form of entertainment. Judy Garland was on stage with him when she was in vaudeville, and she has this funny talk show interview where she remembers Haji Ali. But Haji Ali will represent for us the people with special skills, acrobats, that would have performed with the Dillon Brothers. Of course, this is later than the Dillons, but same idea. I'm not sure why he's dressed in a Saudi garb, and he speaks Italian. I'm not sure.
Say what it-
Yeah, and of course it's in the 20s, it's much later than Dillon Brothers, but they probably performed alongside Regurgitators. My last vaudeville, what?
I'm sorry, did they have a lot of vaudeville houses going up in flames with?
That's a good question, probably, I don't know. The last of our vaudeville show today is going to be the quintessential vaudevillian, and that's Al Jolson. And he was the premier American entertainer for 40 or 50 years. His act is probably very similar to what the Dillon Brothers did. Comic singing, a lot of vivid facial expressions and dancing and frantic movement, and he'll represent the sort of entertainment that the Dillon Brothers provided, because I don't have any video or audio of the Dillon Brothers themselves. So here's Al Jolson. And I think this is from the movie The Jazz Singer.
You ain't heard nothing. You want to hear Toot Toot Tootsie? All right, hold on. So listen, play Toot Toot Tootsie, 3 choruses, you understand? And the 3rd chorus, I whistle. I'll give it to them hard and heavy. Go right ahead. Toot Toot Tootsie, goodbye. Toot Toot Tootsie, don't cry. The little Toot Toot train, that takes me away from you. You don't know just how sad it makes me. Just be pretty and then out, do it over again. Fight for the mail, I never fail. If you don't get a laugh, then you know I'm in jail. Hey, hey, don't cry, Tootsie, don't cry. Kiss me, Tootsie, goodbye.
This is really him whistling. Again, the picture of John and Harry Dillon. They did sketch comedy and comedic songs. One of the common things they would do is take a popular song of the day, change up the lyrics to make it funny, and then sing it and act it out. They also wrote a lot of their own music. Their biggest hit was this song called Put Me Off at Buffalo. There is an early recording of it, but I can't play it. The lyrics are terribly racially insensitive. You can find it on the internet. The premise was kind of funny. It's a guy that's on a train who gets drunk, and he says to the porter, "Dude, I'm drunk, I'll never find my stop, put me off at Buffalo." And the porter puts the wrong guy off at Buffalo. And the drunk wakes up later, in Ohio and realizes he's not where he's supposed to be. That phrase, "put me off at Buffalo," was well known enough that it became sort of the catchphrase for the beginning of jokes, and everyone kind of knew that. You can see an illustration of Puck magazine had "Put Me Off at Buffalo" with an illustration on the cover. So that was John and Harry Dillon's big hit. They also had another big hit with something called "Do, Do, My Huckleberry Do," and I had a copy of that. And these were comedy songs that would lend themselves well to a stage show. The Dillon Brothers, John and Harry, were really sought after. They were quite famous. They made $150 a week, which back then was quite a lot. And they got good reviews in the newspaper. There was one snobby newspaper, I think it was New York City, that said John and Harry Dillon sang several very coarse parodies on coarse melodies. But in general, they were well received. Harry, the younger of the two brothers, became ill in 1915 with some neurodegenerative disorder. He left the stage and died a year later. And younger brother Lawrence took his place. And so Lawrence and John often performed together. They called themselves America's premier parodists. Lawrence went by the moniker the Thin Dillon because he was very skinny. And he often performed as part of a Dutch team. And a Dutch team on vaudeville was a fat guy and a skinny guy, like Laurel and Hardy. And Lawrence Dillon was the thin one. And one of the routines involved the fat guy mistaking him for an umbrella. And he lift him up and put up his canopy. Even though they traveled around a lot and made a lot of money on vaudeville, they still considered Cortland their home. And they ran businesses here. One of the businesses they ran, they bought out the Cortland Opera House and ran it as a theater. They showed vaudeville shows in it. Later they put a skating rink in it. Chris Buck sent me a picture of their dancing academy, which must have been in the Opera House, and they called it Dillon Brothers Amusement Company. And it was the three, William, Lawrence, and Stephen, who ran this. I want to turn now to the most famous of the Dillon brothers. So we've heard about John and Harry and Lawrence. The fourth brother was William Dillon, and he became the most famous. He grew up in Cortland, and he wrote an autobiography, which you can find on the internet, called Life Doubles in Brass. It's kind of hard to read now, but it's funny. It's a funny telling of what it was like to be on vaudeville and all the escapades he had. He had a lot of different jobs in the town of Cortland. He brags about riding his bike to Groton to visit a girlfriend. That's quite a ride on a bike. He could not resist the lure of the stage. He was a very smart kid, very good student. His parents had high aspirations for him to get some kind of profession that was more noble than vaudeville. But he couldn't resist the temptation. And when he was 17, he left high school and he joined a traveling medicine show. These were smaller groups, very much on the same theme of vaudeville, but they went to smaller towns, and their purpose was to sell medicine. And they'd have little variety acts that would draw people in to buy the medicine. And he had pictures of himself as a teenager performing for this medicine show. They were selling Dr. Hicks's snake oil cure, the genuine Katonka remedy. And he performed various comical characters. And found that he liked it. He did come back to Cortland and finish his education, and he was a very good student, so his parents decided he ought to study law at Cornell. And apparently he was willing, and apparently he was a good enough student to get a place at the law school in Cornell. So there was a tearful farewell at the train station with his trunk packed, the train station behind the house. He said goodbye to his parents. He got on the train, and he promptly went to Boston and joined a vaudeville company. And these were the days before cell phones, when parents had no idea where you were. They did not find out for about 6 months that he had not gone to Cornell to study law. But he was quite good at acting and dancing and singing. He tried his hand in drama. He was in some dramatic plays. This one was called Why Women Sin and East Lynne. He was quite a good-looking guy, and by all accounts, he was a pretty good actor. But his real strength was in comedy, and musical comedy in particular. I put some posters of some of the vaudeville troupes he was with. He was with a whole bunch of different ones. Gus Hill apparently had some guy that could swing heavy clubs. And then this one, which was quite famous, A.L.G. Field Greater Minstrels. And I wanted to show this just to mention that a lot of these comedy songs and musical numbers were done in blackface. And I don't want to glorify that or make it seem funny, because as a country we're not real proud of that. But it is a historical fact, and I just wanted to make a nod to the blackface idea. This is a great picture I found on Ancestry. This is Lawrence Dillon, the thin Dillon, along with Harry Dillon in their top hat and tails, so they must have performed at certain points together as well. Will Dillon was an astute businessman. He realized that on vaudeville you had to come up with new music all the time, and he did. He was very good at writing and singing comic songs. But he realized more money could be made. You had to do a different song every year, or the audience would get tired of it. So he started publishing his songs. I have some of his sheet music up here you can look at later, and I want to show you some of them just because this is what my interest is. I love the art, but some of the examples of his sheet music, and he published well over 100 pieces. Be a Mason and Take It by Degrees. You can see that he was the lyricist, and he frequently was the lyricist, and he would collaborate with various composers who would write the music. He very often collaborated with the Von Tilzer brothers, and if you collect music, you'll see their name over and over, Harry and Albert Von Tilzer, which was a pseudonym. But they wrote a lot of music, and he would write the lyrics. Another suggestive title, I Want One Like Pa Had Yesterday. And he wrote the words and music for that. His songs were very contemporary. They usually dealt with themes of the day that people were interested in. Automobiles in the early 1900s were a big thing. So he wrote one called I'd Rather Have a Girlie Than an Automobile, and on the old backseat of the Henry Ford. There's his picture on the left one. And on the right, this one's interesting because the music was written by Lawrence Dillon. And that's the only one of that I've seen where the two brothers collaborated on a piece of published sheet music. Keep Your Foot on the Soft Pedal, again, a collaboration with Von Tilzer, the Von Tilzer brothers, and Stop Thief. I just love the art on these things. Again, with a contemporary theme, Will Dillon wrote a lot of war music. These were from World War I. He was also writing prolifically during World War II, but these war pieces are very collectible. In 1905, this was kind of the height of Will Dillon's fame. He was 28 years old. He was asked to perform in London at the Tivoli Theatre of Varieties, so you know that he was quite well known. He was billing himself at that point as the man of 1,000 songs, and he probably did have 1,000 songs. I mean, he published over 100, and he probably had many, many more that weren't published. While he was performing in London, he was a big hit. He made a very important friendship, and here's the quiz part of my talk. You cannot answer. I'd like to show you a picture of the friend that he made in London. And I want to see if anyone knows who this is. Who is he?
Looks like Harpo Marx.
We have some clues here, right? We figure he's British because of his teeth, right? and he's got the kilt and the sporran and the chromock, so he's Scottish.
It's Harry Lauder?
Yes, very
Oh.
good. I didn't think anyone would know. This is Harry, and I was going to give more hints. Hint for the botanist. There's a shrub that's named for him, the Harry Lauder's walking stick, because he always used that crooked stick. And Winston Churchill called him Scotland's greatest ever ambassador, and he loved Harry Lauder's piece of music with the lyrics written by Will Dillon. In fact, it was said to be Winston Churchill's favorite go-to piece during the dark days of World War II. He would listen to this song. Harry Lauder was the highest paid entertainer in the world in 1911. And here he is. Now, the reason this friendship is important is Will Dillon said, hey Harry, I got this piece of music that I think is really good. It's called Keep Right On Till the End of the Road. And Harry Lauder liked it. He liked it so much that he bought the rights for it. Harry Lauder changed the music, but he kept the lyrics that Will Dillon had written. And it became Harry Lauder's signature piece. It's called Keep Right On to the End of the Road. It's still very familiar in Britain. In fact, it is known as Scotland's unofficial national anthem. It's still played frequently, I'm told, at the end of concerts or at the end of performances. So we're going to hear it, and this is a little bit longer. It's like 3.5 minutes. My purpose in making you listen to it is it's going to get stuck in your brain, and you're going to march out of here singing the song. It sticks with you. And the lyrics to the chorus are on your sheet. If you want to sing along, go ahead. This is Harry Lauder himself singing.
Oh, good. It's the electrical recording.
Yeah. It's not a great recording. Will Dillon's lyrics.
Every road through life is a long, long road filled with joys and sorrows too. As we journey on, how your heart may yearn for the things most dear to you. With wealth and love in tow, but onward we must go. Keep right on till the end of the road. Keep right on till the end. Though the way be long, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. If you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode, where all you love and you dreaming of will be there at the end. get there with a smile, with a good kind thought and an end in view. We can cut short many a mile, so let courage every day be your guiding star always. Keep right on to the end of the road. Keep right on to the end.
You can picture Winston Churchill.
All the way belong, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. If you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode, where all you love and you dreaming of will be there at the end of the road.
One more chorus.
Keep right on till the end of the road. Keep right on till the end. For the way belong, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. If you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode, where all you love and you dreaming of will be there at the end of the road.
That's good.
I was watching people's feet. They were all-
So that's worldwide, probably Will Dillon's most famous lyrics. In 1910, Will Dillon had a terrible taxi accident, I think here in Cortland, I'm not sure. He wasn't expected to live. They had to take part of his forehead out to allow for the brain swelling, but he survived and fully recovered. However, he could never sing quite the same. We don't realize how much of a sounding board our skull is for our voice. I mean, you can tell if you plug one nostril, it changes things. So if you lose part of your forehead, it does change your voice. People in the audience didn't really notice because they probably weren't very musically sophisticated, but he could tell he wasn't what he wanted to be. And he did leave the vaudeville stage in 1913. He continued to perform and he continued to publish music. In fact, in 1911, after his accident, he wrote and published his most famous song, the lyrics of the song, I Want a Girl Just Like the Girl Who Married Dear Old Dad, which the title at least is still familiar to us. And we're all going to sing that at the very end.
But it's funny, because before you had a song that he wrote that was, I want
one like Pa had
yesterday.
yeah.
And I thought, oh boy, it sounds
It
just
is
like I Want a Girl.
He had this mother thing, and I think it was very during World War I. There were a lot of songs about my dear old mother, and
sure.
you know, worshiping mother, which that has sort of gone by the wayside. But he wrote a lot of songs with that theme. So in 1913, he left the vaudeville stage for good, and he came back to Cortland. Made a lot of money, and he was still publishing sheet music because the sheet music industry was booming. But he couldn't sit still. He had too much energy. So he started a new business building houses in Cortland. And he brags in his autobiography that he built 35 houses here in Cortland. Here's one of them. This is his house at the corner of Randall and Church Street. And it's kind of a cool looking little house. I was contacted about this by Kay Zaharis and David Spalding. I don't know if they're here, but they were tearing apart the siding of the house to put on a new porch. And they found these advertising posters that Will Dillon had plastered on the side of the house in 1920 as he was trying to sell it. And kind of gives you a little flavor of Will Dillon's advertising style. You can't fool the man who buys a home. Why did they sell before completed? Get wise. So I'm not sure what or who he was competing with, but he was competing with someone. And there were two others. Use your own judgment. Let the other fellows sleep. My prices beat them all. The answer is the house, lot, location improvement, and the price. Will Dillon.
Wow.
And then this one is hard to read. We think it says, watch the price, compare with others, laugh at the knocker. He has a fish to fry. Don't know what that means. Kay thought maybe knocker meant a derogatory term for an Irishman, maybe? I don't know.
Well, somebody who would speak ill of something.
Others.
You're knocking
You're knocking my
the
business.
competition.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
But those were found underneath the house, and I think they offered the Historical Society the posters, but they were in such brittle condition. The Historical Society said, just cover them up and leave them there, we'll not be there. In 1916, at the advanced age of 39, he married Georgia Head, and they moved to Ithaca, to this little house on Seneca Street, or nice house on Seneca Street. Will was given the opportunity to manage the theaters in Ithaca, and there were 3 theaters at the time, the Star, the Crescent, and the Strand. And Will Dillon, being, having a lot of foresight in business, realized that vaudeville was on its way out, and in 1920, and he knew that the future of entertainment was going to be motion pictures. So most of his focus in these 3 theaters in Ithaca was motion pictures. One of them still did vaudeville until around 1930.
I wish I had it with me. I just came across a 1920 copy of the Cornell Daily Sun, which announced the consolidation of those 3 theaters under one manager. And it's out on the internet.
Well, this I saw. There was an ad here. This is from announcing the opening of the Strand, one of them. It's interesting because he says the first week at the Strand will be devoted to special feature photo plays. That was a real old term for motion pictures. And they were going to show A Tale of Two Cities and other 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, other fun things. What's interesting about, and this is the Strand, what's interesting about this ad is this little blurb here that says, dedicated to the fellows on the hill. Well, Will Dillon was no dummy. He knew that most of his business was going to come from Cornell. So he kind of focused in on Cornell and did a lot of activities up at the campus, and he wrote a song for Cornell. And it says at the bottom of the ad, I don't know if you can read it, get the melody Monday at the Strand. And so he had written a song for Cornell. This is now a very familiar song if you go to Cornell. It's in the Cornell songbook. I'm going to play it. You can sing along with it. It's a classic college song. It's fun. And this is another one of Will Dillon's music that is still widely known and sung today. It's called My Old Cornell. The recording is not great, so I have the lyrics on there. And again, feel free to join in. Oh, I have to skip ahead on this one. This is a women's chorus from Cornell. You can hear the tune from that other Cornell
That's
song.
my neighbor.
That's Will Dillon's house.
Kidding.
Will Dillon in Georgia moved up in the world and bought this fancy house in
You know that
Ithaca.
house.
Yeah, of course. This is Hudson Street, and I think this is where he lived out his days. But yeah, he had a knack for tunes and fun lyrics, and you can hear it in that
He
song.
didn't build that house.
No, I don't know. But that was where he lived. In 1941, so now he's getting older, he's 64, he's still working, publishing music. he entered a song contest. The National Song Contest was put out by, I have to read this, the National Women's Division of the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies. They had a contest for the best patriotic song, and there were thousands of entries, and Will Dillon won. And his song, which I have a copy of, is called Me and My Uncle Sam. Not very good grammar, right? But anyway, he got to go to the White House and met Eleanor Roosevelt. And I love this picture because, first of all, you can see what a good-looking, dapper guy he was at 64. And also the lady in the hat with a net over her face. What was that all about? I kind of remember old ladies wearing nets over their face at church, but that's gone. I guess that'll be another historical talk. I like that picture. He continued to perform in small venues. He was a big Rotarian in his older days, and here he is performing on stage for a Rotary group. It's funny, if you look on the internet, you can see some old Rotary bulletins that he's in. Rotarians like to sing. There's often a picture of the Rotarians singing. But Will Dillon isn't just singing, he's always singing! I mean, he never gave up that joy of performing and kind of being a ham and getting up and making a spectacle. This is funny too. They did a little bio of him in the Cortland or Ithaca paper when he was 84 years old, and he put this picture in, and he must have told them to caption it, Bill Dillon as he looks today. Yeah, I don't think he was 84 in that picture, but he did have a sense of humor. He died at the age of 89 in Ithaca in 1966. So now my talk part is over. We're going to have a live performance. Now I want to say a little bit about this song. The lyrics were written by Will Dillon. Very suggestive lyrics, once again. You have to listen to these. The music was written by his buddy, Harry Von Tilzer. This was written for a young Al Jolson, who was an up-and-comer on the vaudeville stage. Al Jolson was 24. I'm calling this performance today a world re-premiere. This was a big song in 1910, but it's nowhere to be found on the internet in any way, shape, or form. So now we're going to put it on the internet and get it reintroduced. This is the world premiere of Hip-Hip-Hypnotize Me. My mother, all the way from Greene, is going to accompany us on the piano, and my friend Joe Finetti, all the way from Rochester, is going to perform this.
I think one of the vaudeville sayings was never follow a kid act. Or animals. But I have to add that to never follow Val's act, because that was really a great talk. Okay, let's see. Let's look this up here. All right, take it away. Probably be a little dancing at this point, but that's not my thing.
A hypnotist once in a vaudeville show was admired by a maid in the very front row. She flirted, 'tis true, and made eyes just a few. The hypnotist thought it was someone he knew. He met her that night and escorted her home. Said, kiss me now, dearie, and then I will roam. I'm afraid, she said low, to be kissed by a beau. But if you hypnotize me, why, then I won't know. Hip, 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 hypnotize me, Mr. Flip, 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 mesmerize me. You can roll your eyes, show me how. I don't care what becomes of me now. Go on, please, hurry, Mr. Man. Don't stop for nothing right now if you can. I don't care what you do, I'll take my chances with you. If I'm hip, 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 hypnotized.
Little shaking of hips, maybe other parts of the anatomy, I don't know.
Oh, mister, where am I, said she. Oh, yes, I remember. You hypnotized me. Don't go yet, remain, mesmerize me again. Father's not home and my ma's down in Maine. Kiss me once more, won't you please, Mr. Man? My husband won't care if you do hold my hand. Your husband, he cried, I'll be shot by your side. Oh, don't you be afraid, for he's dead, she replied. Hip, 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 hypnotize me, Mr. Flip, 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 mesmerize me, you can roll your eyes, show me how. I don't care what becomes of me now. Go on, please, hurry, Mr. Man. Don't stop for nothing right now if you can. I don't care what you do, I'll take my chances with you. If I'm hip, 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 hypnotized.
Thank you, Will, for those words.
Now we're going to have audience participation singing. We're going to sing Will Dillon's biggest hit in the United States, I Want a Girl Just Like the Girl That Married Dear Old Dad. Joe will sing the verses and you can sing the chorus.
How happy you will be. I have looked all over, but no girlie can I find who seems to be just like the little girl I have in mind. I will have to look around until the right one I have found. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old Dad. She was a pearl and the only girl that Daddy ever had. A good old-fashioned girl with heart so true, one who loves nobody else but you. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old Dad. By the old mill stream there sits a couple old and gray. Though years have rolled away, their hearts are young today. Mother dear looks up at Dad with love light in her eye. He steals a kiss, a fond embrace, while evening breezes sigh. They're as happy as can be, so that's the kind of love for me. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old Dad. She was a pearl and the only girl that Daddy ever had. A good old-fashioned girl with heart so true, one who loves nobody else but you. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old Dad.
Yeah. Wow.
The beer parody on that?
Oh, yeah, I was just,
Oh,
I
good.
think.
Oh, I had not heard that there's a beer parody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how many other people know parodies. This is what the one is. Well,
I want a beer just like the beer that plastered my old man. A real old-fashioned beer with lots of foam. It took 6 men to carry Daddy home. I want a beer just like the beer that plastered my old man.
now, do you know the one? I don't know anything beyond the first line, which is.
I want a girl just like the girl that Dad had on the side.
I'm sure there are probably lots of good lyrics. We'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's especially interesting to know that they were basically parodists.
Right.
And, you know,
Right.
it's ironic that their
Probably
own
like
their own
that.
song is
Their own
parodied.
songs are parodied.
Well,
Yeah.
you're a great singing audience.
Thank you.
And the last word, I want to give everyone an assignment. On the back of your handout is a piece of sheet music called There'll Be Stars in the Flag. This was on the back of Will Dillon's autobiography. He thought very, very highly of this song, and he was quite disappointed that it didn't get more attention. It's a little patriotic fluff piece, but I think we should do our best to publicize this. It would be the perfect ending for an elementary school chorus production or band production. If any of you know music teachers or other people in music, pass this out. It is copyrighted. I don't know what the ins and outs of performing it would be. I'm sure it can't be too difficult to get the right to perform it. But I think in Will's honor, we should publicize the song that he felt deserved more attention.
It's still under copyright.
It is. It was copyrighted in 1940 something. It's still in copyright, so you'd have to get permission. I'm sure the permission would be granted. But so that's the end of the Will Dillon talk. I have sheet music you can look at. My mother will probably plunk them out on the piano if you want to hear the tunes. And any questions?
I have a question. What happened to Gus?
Now Gus was the sixth brother who did. So there was John and Harry at first, and then Lawrence, and then Will, and then Stephen, who did a lot of music management, and he did some performing, and then Gus was the sixth brother. And I didn't look into very much. I know he performed some on vaudeville, but I don't know a lot about him.
Well, when I was much younger, I was on my way home walking from St. Mary's over across Church Street, and my aunt was standing on the corner of Church and Elm doing this, and I walked home and I went to my mother and I said, I just saw Aunt Mary. And she's slapping and hitting hands and doing, lots of this. She goes, I think somebody said she could speak. He was deaf.
Oh.
One of the brothers was deaf.
Yeah.
So he was a deaf
His
musician.
name was Augustus Ignatius.
Yes.
Which is
They're all buried in town in St. Mary's. His
Yeah,
name is
St. Mary's.
Augustus.
Are there any Dillon relatives here?
He lived at the Cortland Hotel until he died, this gentleman now.
Huh.
Well, I'm one of the few relatives, and Jim is the
Is that
living
Jim Dorr?
relative.
Jim? Dillon?
That's Jim Dillon.
Oh, Jim Dillon.
Jim Dillon.
Oh, you're Jim Dorr. Okay.
No, I am.
Make up your mind.
Which one?
Doing your vaudeville act.
So we figured out Jim Dorr was the first person twice removed to the Dillon Brothers.
How about Janice Dylan? Janice was your husband?
Bill.
Bill.
Skylar William.
Was he a relative?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was, okay.
I mean, there were 10 children, so I'm sure there's lots of relatives still around.
Wow.
So,
Nice.
glad to hear about all of this.
Good. They were a fun group of guys.
Yeah.